Release yourself. That's Jim Weeder. Jim Weeder's Project Percolator. The CD is called Pulse. And of course, it's Release Yourself. We heard earlier from him on the CD Dreamline. If you wish to know more about Jim and his work and where he's playing, his band, hot band, jimweeder.com, JIMWEIDER.com. Good friend. Always appreciate him. Great guy. Used to be guitarist in the band. The band that used to back Bob Dylan, and they had several CDs of their own in recent years with Jim, which I thought were excellent. We're going to go into our next guest, and our next guest is Karen L. Arthur, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a psychotherapist and yoga instructor and a graduate of Psychosynthesis Institute, and she's an EMDRIA approved consultant and is trained in EFT, Ericksonian hypnosis, thought field therapy, and mindfulness as well. And she has studied extensively in mind-body healing therapies and practices, including shiatsu, martial arts, yoga, meditation, and contemplative care of the dying. Her integrated method of psychotherapy includes traditional and non-traditional methods, and this method includes successfully proven techniques from energy psychology and the neurosciences, such as EFT and EMDR. Currently, Karen practices in New York City with specialties in trauma, anxiety, grief, stress, and performance enhancement for sports and the creative arts. And we're very happy that she is with us. Hello, Karen.
Hi, Gary, and thank you.
Thank you. And you're listening to WRPI Troy, the Upstate Underground. Thank you all for listening. Karen, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and how are you, Gary?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Great.
It's always great to be here in the studio. I'm telling you, I just love doing it. Being able to present this kind of material to our listeners, being able to play a wide variety of music, to be part of an experience with surrounded by creative minds and people in the studio. People that here on campus, other DJs, the students. It's a very creative environment, which I'm happy to be a part of here at the WRPI studios on the RPI campus. So it's a thrill. Like I'm always happy when I'm here.
Great. How lucky you are to be there.
You're right.
And it's great to be here to talk about EFT today as well.
And I'm so thrilled that we're doing it because, Karen, first of all, why don't we just go into what this process is? I'm sure a lot of people are curious. What does EFT stand for? And how long have you been using it, and what does it do?
Okay. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history and then go into some theory and technique as well about EFT.
Okay.
So EFT is emotional freedom technique, and it was discovered, created, and developed by a man named Gary Craig. And I've been a psychotherapist for over 20 years in New York City. And this technique has really begun to change the way I work with people therapeutically. And it also empowers people with a very simple and effective self-help tool that they can take with them outside of the office, so their healing can continue in an independent way. So I've been doing EFT for about 2 years now in my practice. And
yes.
After 18 years of being in practice, this technique has radically transformed the way I work. And it really falls into the category of a new branch of psychology called energy psychology. And it has both a long and short history. So rather than go through all of the historical components of EFT, I'll describe briefly some of the key influences.
Oh, great.
So EFT is an approach which incorporates bioenergetic systems such as acupuncture, meridians, and treatment. So needless to say, it began thousands of years ago when ancient Chinese wisdom recognized that there was energy within and around human beings. And this energy is called qi in China, ki in Japan, and prana in India. So in both India and China, treatments and practices developed around life energy that included pathways as well as descriptions for these pathways. And traditional Chinese medicine really arrived in the West when James Reston, who was a journalist who accompanied Henry Kissinger to China during the Nixon administration needed an emergency appendectomy. And the anesthesia that was used was acupuncture. So when he came back to this country, Reston's personal experience, amplified by Kissinger's press briefings, really changed and captured the attention of the American people. It took a while for Western medicine to begin to integrate it, and we're still not fully there yet, but we're working on it. So I'm going to fast forward, and there's other components of EFT historically, but I think what's most important is to really understand that it's embedded in Eastern Chinese medicine, particularly the acupuncture system.
Well, that's good. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and EFT is emotional acupuncture without needles.
Yeah.
And it's a tapping technique. So in the 80s, and I'm going to describe that more and more as I go on, but all this will connect. So in the 80s, Roger Callahan, a psychologist, developed a technique called thought field therapy. And he was really the first person to develop a structure of tapping on acupuncture points for emotional problems while focusing on the problem itself. And he developed many different algorithms for many different emotional problems. So he had a systematic way and a strategic way of tapping on acupuncture points that treated phobias and anxiety. So he founded a lot of specific sequences of acupuncture points for different emotional problems, which really became very cumbersome. So at the same time, Pat Carrington and Gary Craig studied with Roger Callahan. Both Pat Carrington and Gary Craig came up independently with the question, what would happen if a person tapped on all the meridian endpoints rather than having different sets of points for different emotional problems? Which makes sense. If you clear all the meridians, it really doesn't matter what the emotional problem is. You're still clearing all the meridians. So Pat Carrington developed a system called AcuTap. Gary Craig, at the same time, and independent of one another, developed emotional freedom technique, emotional acupuncture without needles, using a single algorithm of 14 points. So Pat Carrington eventually left AcuTap because Gary Craig's EFT was much more effective than her technique. So hence the birth of EFT in the 90s. So the theory is really embedded in a whole energetic principle, and I'm going to go through some of these principles, and it might sound like quantum physics, and I would say that basically EFT comes from quantum physics, comes from spirituality, comes from energy psychology, as well as traditional psychological thought. So Dr. Callahan came up with this theory that fields of energy are invisible, non-physical electromagnetic patterns in space. They bind energetically, and they encode information into a cohesive arrangement that affects human behavior and emotional experience. And if you tap on acupuncture points, you're really affecting a major influence on these electromagnetic fields. And of course, in today's Western medical model, we don't have the instrumentation yet to measure some of these energy fields. So fields are when two bodies are separated in space and they exert a pressure or a force on each other. And taken a step further, all things are composed of vibrations organized into fields that permeate an entire structure, and in this case the structure is the human body. So there are human energy fields that are subtle, not yet detectable by current forms of instrumentation, as I said, but they have and resonate at different frequencies. So both physical and subtle energies resonate at different frequencies. So moving along to acupuncture, we have 12 meridians in the body, each corresponding to different organs, and we have 2 vessels that are reservoirs of energy. And all of these meridians not only correspond to organs, but they correspond to emotions as well. So it makes sense that if you begin to tap on these points, you would be able to influence change in your emotional state. So acupoints are electrical in nature, and they're the transmitters of electromagnetic energy. And just like in energy psychology, acupuncture does not treat the mind, body, and energy system as separate. It's one unit. So chi is the life force, and it's used both in EFT and in acupuncture, and chi enters the body through breathing and through acupoints themselves. Breath will circulate this energy through meridians, and meridians will go through related organs. So as this circulates, it makes sense that sometimes energy gets stuck and gets blocked, and there's different emotional responses to this stuckness, and this is where the tapping comes into play, because it will free the disruption of the block.
When you use this tapping, does it free it right away? Does it have? Do you have to continue to do this tapping? Do you do it on yourself? Can another person do it on you? How does that work, Karen?
That's a good question. When you can do the tapping on yourself, when you're seeing an EFT practitioner, you'll learn the points. You will be taught the points, so you can take it with you and use it as a self-help tool.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but it's really a good idea to learn it from an experienced practitioner. You can download Gary Craig's manual, and you can download his manual at emofree.com, and that's emofree.com, and do it based on his manual. But he advises that it's always better to really visit with an experienced practitioner to really get the technique and all its nuances before you begin to use it on your own, especially if you're dealing with intense emotion and experiences of trauma.
How long have you been a practitioner?
I've been a practitioner of EFT for 2 years, and I've been using this in my practice. It's really changed my practice, as I said before. It's radically shifted my practice from doing traditional verbal psychotherapy to working with energy and EFT.
Okay, well, thank you. What is EMDR? Is that similar?
EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and that's a technique that was developed by Francine Shapiro, and I've been doing that for, about 10 years. I'm a consultant for the organization, and that consists of eye movements. So you move your eyes bilaterally as you set up the protocol for the trauma. There's an extensive protocol. And then you move your eyes bilaterally, and you resolve the issue. It's not like the trauma is always happening. When someone's been traumatized, in their minds, it's always going on. It's almost like obsessive thinking. So whatever is in the mind seems like it's the present. So people who have been traumatized are constantly re-traumatized, even by their thought patterns.
Yeah, so unless you have to reprogram, don't you?
Right. So when you're doing the EMDR, and this will also relate to EFT, when you're doing the EMDR, you resolve the trauma so that it's not like the trauma didn't happen, but it's really in the distance. And you're the objective observer of it, and you no longer have the traumatic emotional reaction to it. And then you can also integrate and reprocess other feelings in response to that event by using eye movement.
Yes, thank you. Well, I want to share with our listeners that I met Karen at an event about a couple months ago, I guess, and she shared this the EFT with me, and we sat and did it, and I did have a pronounced I had an experience that I needed to have some peace with, and by doing this process, this EFT process with her, and she was really great, by the way, in the way she did it with me, and her generosity and caring, and I find this to be true of Karen as a person, that that she helped me through this tapping. And I remember leaving this event in my car feeling really happy in my body. It was just like the body felt a general happiness. My mind, the thought process was gentle. It was no longer harsh. It was no longer didactic or telling me what to think or what to do. It was mellowed out, and it was just a general sense of being at peace with myself. So is that somewhat explain some of the experience that some people may have by going through this?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And Gary Craig calls it a tearless technique. And I found that to be true in my practice as well. Whereas other techniques of psychotherapy can create an intense emotional catharsis, and it's very painful to work through the issues. And it's not that it's pain-free, emotionally pain-free, but it's almost a tearless technique. You process the information at a very rapid speed. I won't say warp speed, but it's a very rapid speed. So you're not spending years and years in therapy trying to work through an issue. It happens quickly, and it happens almost tearlessly.
That's the way I felt. I may have been. It was a traumatic experience for me, and right now we've been working. I'm in a really good relationship with this whole experience that initially caused this trauma, and I recognize that it's a trigger. What happened to me from the outside was a trigger that triggered something from inside, and what the difficulty I was having was blaming the outside for my inner experience of being upset and all the negative emotions. Then I recognized over a period of time that my change comes from within, and my relationship with who caused the trigger is still. I've acknowledged that I still love these people, and I hold them in my heart in a very special place, because something happened. A series of things. I'm very fortunate to be doing this radio program because I'm in touch with incredible authors and their energy and what they share. The next guest who will be following you, I heard on a CD where she said that if you think of something, if you're in a positive way, if you hold a person in a they are going to actually experience that whether you see them or not.
Exactly. And I think as we had talked about, even it was yesterday, that the universe has energy and all the information that's needed is encoded in the universe in a unified field of consciousness. So what you focus on really gets transmitted into the universe.
I was thinking I needed something for them to do in order to make it right. And then I realized I don't need that.
Right. Exactly. And in EFT and also in other meridian techniques, EFT is a category unto itself with a specific protocol, and other meridian tapping techniques includes, it's an umbrella for a multitude of different ways of working with the meridians. What EFT will focus on is not so much the memory, but the disruption in the body's energy system. Gary Craig called this the Great Discovery Statement, where the cause of all negative emotion is a disruption in the body's energy system. It's not the memory. If the memory does not cause a disruption in the body's energy, the negative emotion cannot occur. So if you clear the disruption through the sequence of tapping techniques, you really clear the reaction and the emotional trauma that you're experiencing. And when that disruption is cleared, it's energetic. So what you're putting out into the universe, if the universe is a bunch of dancing molecules, you're projecting a bunch of other dancing molecules and drawing them in as well in a positive way, because you've cleared the energy in your system, so you don't have you're not carrying the same emotional baggage.
You're not carrying the same emotional baggage. And a lot of times when we're carrying this emotional baggage, we have a tendency to try to find where we can dump it or project where it came from. So the cause has to be outside of ourselves, you see. When we're suffering, it's hard for us to acknowledge that we can make the change, or the change comes about from within us.
Right, and when you change within, you change your reaction and your place in the universe, so what you attract is going to be different.
That's right. Well, thank you. Karen Arthur is our guest here on this half hour of In the Spirit. We have another guest coming on in the next half hour. We're talking about meridian tapping, which is emotional EFT. What is it?
Emotional freedom technique.
Yeah, emotional freedom technique. That's founder is Gary Craig. You also mentioned, did you say emailfree.com?
Emo. EMO free.com.
EMO. Okay, go to emofree.com and you can get a copy of the book in which it describes the technique, correct?
It describes it in detail.
In detail.
If we have some time, Gary, could I say a little bit more about the
We only got about 2 minutes, but
we only have about 2 minutes.
So
okay, so
I want to make sure people know about your event too.
Okay, all right. So in EFT, I just want to make it clear that while you're tapping on endpoints of meridian points, you're tapping on 14 in Gary Craig's long form, you're also using statements of intentionality and affirmations to affect change in your energy system.
Good point.
So these statements of intentionality are really very, very, very strong, because you're saying, even though I have this issue, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And that in and of itself is very powerful, because many people will have self-hatred, will dislike themselves because they have a problem. And when you're saying, even though I have this issue, I deeply and completely love and accept myself, you're feeding your energetic system something different. And that really has a profound effect on your healing.
Oh, yes, it does. Well, thank you for sharing some time with us. Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for being with us. It's a great pleasure to have you on.